The last rays of sunlight filtered through the dusty windows of Mason Gallery, casting long shadows across the empty exhibition space. I stood there, breathing in the familiar scent of oil paint and aged wood, trying to process the events of the past 24 hours. My name is Emma Mason, and yesterday, I inherited what my family considered their greatest disappointment: a failing art gallery in downtown Boston. The lawyer's office still felt vivid in my memory. The heavy mahogany desk, the ticking grandfather clock, and my brother Marcus's smugly expensive cologne filling the air. Our parents' will reading should have been a somber affair, but Marcus couldn't contain his triumph as Mr. Patterson read out the terms. To our son, Marcus Mason, we leave the sum of $50 million, our Hampton estate, and controlling interest in Mason Industries. Mr. Patterson's voice had been clinical, detached. To our daughter Emma, we leave Mason Gallery and its contents. Marcus had actually laughed out loud. Finally, Dad always said you get exactly what you deserved, Emma. I can still see his perfectly tailored suit, his Italian leather shoes, the way he lounged in his chair like he owned the room. In many ways, he now did. The gallery's been losing money for years, he continued, examining his manicured nails. But hey, at least you'll have plenty of dust to keep you company. Maybe you can sell pencil sketches to tourists. The thing is, Marcus wasn't wrong about the gallery's financial situation. Mason Gallery had been struggling for the past decade. What had once been Boston's premier showcase for emerging artists had gradually declined into a barely breaking-even operation that most serious collectors ignored. But what Marcus didn't understand, what my parents never understood, was that I had always seen something in this place that they missed. I grew up in these halls, spending countless afternoons with my grandfather, Theodore Mason, the gallery's founder. While my parents were busy grooming Marcus for the family business and my mother was planning his path to an MBA, Grandpa Theo taught me about art. Real art. Not just the price tags and investment potential that my parents fixated on, but the soul behind each piece. Emma, my dear, he would say, his eyes twinkling behind wire-rimmed glasses, remember that true value isn't always visible at first glance. Sometimes the greatest treasures hide in plain sight, waiting for the right person to discover them. Those words echoed in my mind now as I walked through the gallery's main hall. The space was beautiful, even in its current state. Soaring ceilings, classic crown molding, and huge windows that, when clean, could flood the room with natural light. But years of minimal maintenance had taken their toll. The hardwood floors needed refinishing, the walls cried out for fresh paint, and half the track lighting had burned out. I reached the back office, my footsteps echoing in the silence. This had been my grandfather's sanctuary, though my parents had eventually converted it into a sterile storage space. Filing cabinets lined the walls, and a layer of dust covered everything. But underneath it all, I could still feel Grandpa Theo's presence. Running my fingers along his old desk, now relegated to a corner and piled with boxes, I remembered the stories he used to tell me about the gallery's early days. How he built it from nothing in the 1960s, turning it into a haven for artists who would later become legends. There were whispers that he had amassed an incredible private collection over the years, but after his death 15 years ago, nothing extraordinary was ever found. My parents had searched, of course. They spent months combing through the gallery, convinced that Grandpa Theo had hidden away masterpieces worth millions. They hired experts, brought in appraisers, even had the walls scanned for hidden spaces. They found nothing but the gallery's regular inventory. Decent pieces, but nothing that would make headlines. Eventually, they gave up. The gallery became an afterthought, a tax write-off. They kept running out of some lingering sense of obligation to Grandpa Theo's memory. They focused on Mason Industries instead, grooming Marcus to take over the family's real legacy, while I studied art history and worked as a curator at smaller museums. A sudden draft made me shiver, pulling me back to the present. Night had fallen while I was lost in memories, and the gallery felt different in the darkness. The shapes of sculptures threw strange shadows on the walls, and the few paintings still on display seemed to watch me with knowing eyes. I was about to leave when something caught my attention. A slight unevenness in the floorboards near Grandpa Theo's desk that I'd never noticed before. Kneeling down, I ran my hands over the wood. There was definitely something off about the pattern, a subtle irregularity that seemed intentional rather than the result of age. My heart started beating faster as I remembered another of Grandpa Theo's favorite sayings. The best hiding place is one that looks like it's trying to hide something else. I spent the next hour examining every inch of that floor and the surrounding area. Just when I was about to give up, my fingers found it. A tiny lever disguised as a knot in the wood. With trembling hands, I pulled it. The mechanism was so well crafted that it barely made a sound. A small section of the floorboards slid aside, revealing a narrow space underneath. Inside was a leather-bound journal, its pages yellow with age, and a single key that looked far older than the gallery itself. The journal was my grandfather's. I recognized his distinctive handwriting immediately, but it wasn't his usual flowing script. These notes were hurried, almost frantic, filled with sketches and calculations and what looked like coded messages. One page caught my eye. At the top, in bold letters, it read, "The True Collection, for Emma's eyes only." My hands shook as I turned the page. But before I could read further, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Marcus. "Meeting tomorrow at 9 a.m. Time to discuss selling that dusty gallery of yours. I already have buyers interested in the building." I looked at the journal in my hands, then back at the message. Marcus had no idea what I just found, and for now, that was exactly how I wanted to keep it. I carefully returned the journal and key to their hiding place, making sure the floor panel was securely closed. Walking out of the gallery that night, I felt different. The weight of my seemingly worthless inheritance had transformed into something else: anticipation. My grandfather had left me more than just a struggling gallery. He'd left me a mystery. And tomorrow, while Marcus would be planning to strip this place for parts, I would begin to uncover what Grandpa Theo had hidden away all those years ago. I locked the gallery's front door, the key feeling more significant in my hand than ever before. Looking up at the building's elegant facade, I smiled, remembering Grandpa Theo's words one last time. "Patience, Emma. The best stories take time to unfold." He was right. This was just the beginning. I arrived at the gallery early the next morning, well before my 9 a.m. meeting with Marcus. The sunrise painted the empty halls in shades of gold, but I barely noticed. My mind was focused on one thing: the hidden compartment and its contents. Kneeling by Grandpa Theo's old desk, I triggered the secret mechanism again. The journal and key felt heavier now, weighted with possibility. Finding a quiet corner, I began to read. "My dearest Emma," the first page began, "if you're reading this, you've already proven you have the patience and perception I always saw in you. What I'm about to share must remain our secret. The true legacy of Mason Gallery isn't in its walls, but below them." My heart raced as I turned the pages. The journal detailed an incredible story that spanned decades. Grandpa Theo hadn't just been a gallery owner. He'd been part of a network of art preservationists working to protect masterpieces during troubled times. The gallery's basement, it seemed, held more than just storage. A series of detailed drawings showed a complex system of hidden rooms beneath the main floor. According to the journal, Grandpa Theo had spent years secretly modifying the building's original foundation, creating a climate-controlled vault that no one else knew existed. "The key," he wrote, "opens more than just a door. It opens a legacy I've spent my life building. But be careful, Emma. Others have searched for this collection, and not all of them have honest intentions." A sharp knock at the front door made me jump. Marcus stood outside, his expression impatient. I quickly hid the journal and composed myself before letting him in. "Well, if it isn't the curator of dust," he smirked, striding past me. "I brought some potential buyers. They're interested in turning this place into luxury condos." Behind him stood two men in expensive suits, developers, by the look of them. They immediately began discussing load-bearing walls and square footage, treating the gallery's history like an inconvenience to be demolished. The basement would make excellent parking space, one of them said, consulting his tablet. "According to the original plans, it's mostly unused." I felt a chill. If they started digging around down there. "The gallery isn't for sale," I said firmly. Marcus's face darkened. "Don't be ridiculous, Emma. This place is worthless as an art gallery. You can barely pay the utilities." I said no. "Look," Marcus stepped closer, lowering his voice. "I know you had some sentimental attachment to Grandpa's little hobby, but it's time to grow up. Take the money and walk away." I met his gaze steadily. "Like you did, taking the millions while contributing nothing." His face flushed red. "I earned my inheritance by learning the business, not wasting time listening to an old man's fairy tales about art. Get out." My voice was quiet but firm. "All of you. You're making a mistake," Marcus warned as I ushered them toward the door. "I'm trying to help you." "I don't need your kind of help." After they left, I leaned against the wall, my heart pounding. Marcus wouldn't give up easily. He never did. I needed to work fast. Returning to the journal, I studied the basement plans carefully. The entrance to the vault, according to Grandpa Theo's notes, was hidden behind a false wall in the basement's northwest corner. The key would activate a mechanism, but only if used correctly. Taking a deep breath, I descended the basement stairs. The space was exactly as I remembered. Rows of metal shelving holding wrapped paintings and sculptures, old exhibition materials, and decades of paperwork. But now I saw it with new eyes. Following the journal's instructions, I made my way to the northwest corner. At first glance, it looked solid. Bare concrete walls meeting at a right angle. But when I ran my fingers along the surface, I felt subtle irregularities in the pattern. The key fit perfectly into what appeared to be a small crack in the concrete. With trembling hands, I turned it according to the sequence described in the journal. 3/4 right, 1/4 left, then right again. For a moment, nothing happened. Then I heard it. A soft click followed by the whisper of hidden machinery. The false wall swung inward silently, revealing a steel door with a sophisticated electronic keypad. The journal had prepared me for this too. The code was based on a significant date, the day Grandpa Theo first opened the gallery, but written in a specific format. I entered the numbers carefully. 19,650,412. The door opened with a gentle hiss, and climate-controlled air washed over me. Motion-activated lights flickered on, illuminating a sight that took my breath away. The vault was massive, far larger than should have been possible. Rows of carefully preserved paintings lined the walls, each one protected in a custom-designed case. Sculptures stood on pedestals, their forms casting intricate shadows. Display cases held smaller pieces, rare manuscripts, ancient artifacts, and pieces I recognized from my art history studies, but had never expected to see in person. In the center of the room stood a simple desk with a letter placed precisely in the middle. With shaking hands, I opened it. My dearest Emma, welcome to the True Mason Gallery. What you see around you is the work of a lifetime. Not just mine, but the efforts of countless others who believed in preserving beauty and history. Each piece here has a story, and now those stories are yours to protect. You'll find full documentation for every item in the vault, their provenance, their history, and most importantly, their rightful owners. Some of these pieces were entrusted to me for safekeeping during difficult times. Others were rescued from those who would have destroyed them for profit or politics. This collection isn't meant to be sold or displayed for prestige. It exists to be protected until the right time comes for each piece to return home. I've chosen you for this task because you understand that art isn't about price tags or status. It's about preserving the thread of human creativity that connects us all. In the rear of the vault, you'll find a smaller room. That collection is different. Pieces I acquired legally over the years, carefully authenticated and documented. Those belong to you now, to do with as you see fit. They should provide more than enough resources to maintain both the gallery and the vault's mission. Be careful, be patient, and above all, be true to the responsibility you now hold. All my love, Grandpa Theo. I spent hours in the vault, examining each piece with wonder. The collection was staggering. Works by masters I'd only read about, pieces thought lost to history, and others whose existence had only been rumored. In the private collection Grandpa Theo had mentioned, I found dozens of carefully selected works by artists whose values had skyrocketed over the decades. Even a conservative estimate put their worth well over $100 million. But it wasn't the money that brought tears to my eyes. It was the trust my grandfather had placed in me, the legacy he prepared me for all those years ago without my knowing it. A notification on my phone broke the spell. Multiple missed calls from Marcus and a text. This isn't over. You're making a huge mistake. I looked around the vault, at the priceless collection my brother would have sold without a second thought, and smiled. For the first time since inheriting the gallery, I felt completely certain of my path forward. Carefully securing the vault, I headed back upstairs. There was work to be done. The gallery needed renovation, security needed upgrading, and I had a legacy to protect. Marcus was right about one thing. This wasn't over. But he had no idea what he was really fighting against. While he plotted to seize what he thought was a worthless building, I was now the guardian of something far more valuable than money could measure. Looking up at the gallery's walls, I whispered, "Thank you, Grandpa Theo. I won't let you down." The next few weeks passed in a blur of activity. I hired contractors to restore the gallery's original features, but only after having them sign ironclad confidentiality agreements. The basement remained strictly off-limits, listed as undergoing environmental assessment to deter curious eyes. I spent my nights studying Grandpa Theo's journal, learning the stories behind each piece in the vault. Some had been rescued from Nazi looting during World War II, others from more recent conflicts. Each artwork had its own detailed file, including documentation about its rightful owners and the circumstances that had brought it into my grandfather's care. But Marcus, true to his word, wasn't giving up. First came the legal threats. A thick envelope arrived from his lawyers, claiming that the gallery's deteriorated condition constituted negligent management of family assets, and demanding an immediate sale. I handed it to my own attorney, a specialist in art law whom I'd quietly retained using funds from selling just one minor piece from my grandfather's personal collection. Then came the financial pressure. Marcus used his connections to interfere with the gallery's insurance, its utility services, even its property tax assessment. Each time, I countered his moves using resources he didn't know I had. The turning point came on a rainy Tuesday morning. I arrived at the gallery to find Marcus waiting with two men I didn't recognize. "These gentlemen are from the Boston Historical Society," he said, his smile sharp as a razor. "They're very interested in examining the building's original foundation. Apparently, there are concerns about structural integrity." I knew instantly they weren't from any historical society. The way they carried themselves, the subtle bulges under their jackets. These were private investigators, or worse. "The gallery is closed for renovations," I said firmly. "Any inspections need to be scheduled through proper channels." One of the men stepped forward. "We have authorization to leave." I cut him off, "or I'll call the actual authorities." After they'd left, Marcus lingered. "What are you hiding, Emma? There's something in this building worth protecting, isn't there? Something Grandpa Theo left behind." "The only thing I'm protecting is this gallery's future," I replied. "Why can't you accept that?" His expression darkened. "Because I know you. You were always his favorite, always listening to his stories. He must have told you something, left you some clue." "The clue was in plain sight, Marcus. You just never cared enough to look." That night, I knew I had to accelerate my plans. Marcus was getting desperate, and desperate people make dangerous choices. I spent hours in the vault, carefully documenting everything. Then I made 3 phone calls, one to an old friend at the FBI's art crime team, one to a contact at Interpol, and one to the world's leading expert in art repatriation. 2 days later, Marcus made his move. I was working late when I heard the basement door open. Security cameras showed 3 men in dark clothing making their way down the stairs. Marcus wasn't with them, but I had no doubt who had sent them. Calmly, I pressed the silent alarm. Not the gallery's regular system, but a special one I'd had installed that connected directly to law enforcement. Then I made my way to the basement. The men were already at the northwest corner, examining the wall with professional equipment. They'd barely glanced at me when I entered. "Looking for something?" I asked. "Lady, just walk away." One of them growled. "This doesn't concern you." "Actually," I smiled, "it concerns me very much. So do the federal agents who just surrounded the building." As if on cue, voices boomed from above. "FBI. This is a federal art crimes investigation. Everyone remain where you are." What followed was a blur of activity. The would-be thieves were arrested. Marcus, tracked through their phones, was picked up at his home. The search warrants revealed everything: his hired thugs, his plans for the gallery, even his connections to certain unscrupulous collectors who trafficked in stolen art. But the real surprise came the next morning. I had arranged for a special meeting at the gallery. Present were representatives from museums and cultural institutions around the world, along with officials from various governments. Together, we descended into the vault. Their gasps echoed off the walls as the lights revealed the collection. Tears flowed as long-lost masterpieces were rediscovered. Museum directors hugged each other as pieces thought destroyed were found perfectly preserved. I shared everything: Grandpa Theo's documentation, his detailed records, the stories of how each piece had come into his care. Over the next year, we would work together to repatriate every artwork to its rightful place, earning the gallery international recognition not for what it possessed, but for what it returned. Marcus watched it all unfold from behind bars, his reputation and freedom lost to his own greed. The evidence found in his home had implicated him in other art trafficking schemes, ensuring he'd have plenty of time to reflect on his choices. As for the gallery itself, I used part of Grandpa Theo's personal collection to establish a foundation dedicated to protecting and preserving art during times of conflict. The gallery became a center for education and advocacy, teaching future generations about the importance of cultural heritage. 1 year to the day after discovering the vault, I stood in the newly renovated main hall. The space was filled with light, the original architectural details restored to their former glory. A special exhibition was opening, not of precious masterpieces, but of works by emerging local artists, just as Grandpa Theo had showcased when he first opened the gallery. In my office, once Grandpa Theo's sanctuary, I keep 2 things on my desk. The first is his journal, a reminder of the legacy he entrusted to me. The second is a small news clipping from the day Marcus was sentenced, not out of spite, but as a reminder that true value isn't found in what you can take, but in what you choose to protect. The gallery still bears the Mason name, but it stands for something different now. Not just a family legacy, but a commitment to preserving art for future generations. Every day, as I walk through these halls, I feel Grandpa Theo's presence, and I know he would be proud. Sometimes, late in the evening when the gallery is quiet, I think about that moment when I first found the hidden compartment in the floor. How close I came to giving up, to letting Marcus turn this place into just another luxury development. But Grandpa Theo had taught me well. The greatest treasures aren't always visible at first glance, and some things are worth far more than their market value. The vault beneath the gallery is empty now, its contents returned to their rightful homes around the world. But the space remains, ready if ever needed again, a secret chamber waiting to protect the next piece of history that needs saving. And sometimes, when young artists visit the gallery, their eyes shining with the same passion I once saw in Grandpa Theo's, I share with them his favorite saying: true value isn't always visible at first glance. Sometimes the greatest treasures hide in plain sight, waiting for the right person to discover them. They never know that I'm not just talking about art. The gallery that everyone thought was worthless turned out to be priceless, not because of what it contained, but because of what it stood for: a legacy of protection, preservation, and the understanding that some things are worth more than all the millions in the world. Marcus may have gotten the money in our parents' will, but I got something far more valuable: a purpose, a mission, and the chance to prove that sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even, but doing what's right. The Mason Gallery stands tall in downtown Boston, its windows gleaming in the sunlight. It's no longer the dusty, failing space my brother mocked. It's a beacon of hope, a guardian of culture, and a testament to the fact that true worth often lies far deeper than the surface. And me? I'm no longer just Emma Mason, the disappointment who got the worthless inheritance. I'm the protector of a legacy that spans generations, the keeper of a tradition that values preservation over profit, and the proof that sometimes the best things in life really do come covered in dust, if you just know where to look.
The crystal ballroom of the Rosewood Hotel sparkled with 1,000 points of light, each crystal chandelier casting rainbow prisms across the faces of elegantly dressed guests. I stood in the shadows near the entrance, watching the scene unfold before me like some bizarre theater production. The bride, my sister Olivia, floated through the crowd in her designer wedding gown, accepting congratulations with practiced grace. Our parents, George and Margaret Wilson, followed in her wake like proud satellites, their faces glowing with the kind of joy they'd never shown for me. "Just sign here, Ms. Martinez," the wedding coordinator whispered, extending a tablet with the final payment authorization for the venue. I suppressed a smile at the false name I'd used to purchase the Rosewood Hotel chain 3 years ago. If only they knew that Elena Martinez, the mysterious hotel magnate, was actually Elena Wilson, the daughter they declared dead a decade ago. I scrawled my signature and handed back the tablet, adjusting the elegant mask that covered the upper half of my face. The masquerade theme had been Olivia's idea, though I doubted she realized how perfectly it served my purpose. Behind their own masks, not even my parents recognized the daughter they'd erased. The ceremony was beautiful, I murmured to the coordinator, my voice carrying the slight Spanish accent I'd cultivated for my Elena Martinez persona. "Your staff has done an excellent job." She beamed at the praise, unaware that I signed her paychecks. "Thank you, Ms. Martinez. We're so honored you came personally to oversee the Wilson wedding. They're one of Boston's most prominent families, you know." I knew all too well. The Wilsons had been Boston aristocracy for generations, their shipping empire dating back to the 1800s. That legacy of success and perfection had been everything to my parents, and the reason they found it so easy to erase their defective daughter. My crime? Refusing to marry the man they'd chosen for me, the heir to a rival shipping company. At 22, fresh out of business school with dreams of modernizing the family company, I dared to suggest that arranged marriages were outdated, that maybe the shipping industry needed innovation more than it needed mergers through matrimony. The argument that followed still echoed in my nightmares. My father's rage, my mother's cold disappointment, and finally the ultimatum: marry Jonathan Porter or be cut off completely. I chose freedom. The next morning, I emptied my trust fund, a mere $50,000 they'd forgotten to freeze, and disappeared. I spent the first month in a cheap motel, teaching myself everything I could about modern business practices, digital transformation, and venture capital. I changed my appearance, adopted a new accent, and built Elena Martinez from scratch. What I didn't know then was that my parents had chosen to deal with my departure in the most dramatic way possible. Instead of admitting their daughter had defied them, they told everyone I died in a sailing accident off the coast. They even held a funeral, complete with an empty casket and tearful eulogies about their beloved Elena, taken too soon. I learned about my own death 6 months later when I tried to contact my younger sister. The email I sent bounced back, but not before I saw her social media profile picture, Olivia in black, standing beside our parents at my memorial service. That was the moment Elena Wilson truly died and Elena Martinez was born. "Ms. Martinez?" The coordinator's voice pulled me back to the present. "Would you like to be seated for dinner?" I nodded, following her to a table near the back of the ballroom. Close enough to observe everything, far enough to maintain my cover. The irony of paying for my sister's wedding venue and owning the mansion our parents still lived in wasn't lost on me. Over the past decade, I'd systematically purchased every property the Wilsons used, every hotel they frequented, and a controlling interest in most of their business partners. They just didn't know it yet. My father's voice suddenly carried across the room, loud enough to reach my table. "Everyone, if I could have your attention, please." The crowd quieted as George Wilson raised his champagne glass. He cut an impressive figure in his tuxedo, silver hair gleaming under the chandeliers. 10 years had added distinguished lines to his face, but hadn't diminished his commanding presence. "Today is a day of joy, celebrating the marriage of my only daughter, Olivia, to the love of her life." Only daughter. The words hit like a physical blow, even after all these years. "But it's also a day tinged with bittersweetness," he continued, his voice thick with practiced emotion. "I can't help but think of our beloved Elena, Olivia's sister, who left us far too soon. She would have loved to see this day." Beside him, my mother dabbed at her eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief, the perfect breathing mother still mourning her lost child. If only they knew that lost child was sitting 30 feet away, controlling more wealth and power than the Wilson family had accumulated in 6 generations. A server appeared at my elbow. More champagne, Ms. Martinez? I accepted the glass, using the moment to collect myself. I hadn't come here for revenge, or at least, that's what I told myself. I'd built my empire through genuine innovation, transforming struggling businesses into modern powerhouses. The fact that I now controlled most of my family's business interests was just convenient. Such a shame about their older daughter. The elderly woman seated beside me whispered, clearly hoping to share gossip with the mysterious hotel owner. The poor girl died in a sailing accident. They say she was quite troubled before the end, defying her parents, refusing a brilliant marriage match. Some even whispered she might have, She made a vague gesture. Done it on purpose. My fingers tightened around the champagne flute. Of course they'd implied my death was suicide. It fit their narrative of the rebellious daughter who couldn't handle the pressure of their expectations. Better than admitting the truth, that I'd chosen freedom over their suffocating control. The sound of clinking glass drew everyone's attention. Olivia had stood to make her own speech, her new husband beaming beside her. My little sister had grown into a stunning woman, though her beauty had a brittle quality that reminded me of our mother. Thank you all for being here today, she began, her voice carrying the same finishing school polish I'd once been forced to learn. As Father said, this day is perfect in almost every way. The only thing missing is my dear sister, Elena. I took a slow sip of champagne, watching her performance. Elena was more than my big sister. She was my best friend, my protector, my role model. Olivia's voice wavered perfectly. When we were little, she used to tell me that anything was possible if you were brave enough to chase your dreams. I just wish. She paused for dramatic effect. I just wish she could see that I finally found my dream. The crowd murmured sympathetically. I fought the urge to laugh. Olivia had been 12 when I left, old enough to understand exactly what our parents had done. She'd chosen their side, happily stepping into the role of perfect only daughter. The sister who'd supposedly been her best friend hadn't even raided a phone call to warn me about my impending death. As dinner was served, I found myself studying the head table. My parents sat there with Olivia and her new husband, along with his equally wealthy family. They looked like something out of a society magazine. Perfectly groomed, perfectly poised, perfectly false. 10 years ago, their perfect facade had crushed me. Now I saw them clearly, small people desperately clinging to outdated power, unaware that the world had changed around them. The shipping industry they'd dominated for generations was transforming, and they hadn't adapted. Their empire was crumbling, propped up only by the secret investments I'd made through shell companies. Ms. Martinez? A man in an expensive suit approached my table. I recognized him as James Porter, my almost father-in-law, though he aged considerably. I hope you're enjoying the evening. I must say, we were surprised and honored when we heard you be attending personally. I smiled behind my mask. I make it a point to oversee special events at my flagship properties, Mr. Porter, especially for such distinguished families. He preened at the compliment. Yes, well, the Wilsons and Porters have been pillars of Boston society for generations, though I must admit recent years have been challenging. Oh, I kept my tone merely polite, though I knew exactly how challenging things had been for both families. My companies had slowly acquired controlling interests in their major shipping routes, modernizing operations and squeezing their profit margins. The industry isn't what it used to be, he said, sighing heavily. These tech startups, these modern logistics companies, they're disrupting everything. Why just last month we lost our biggest client to some upstart called Phoenix Maritime. I managed not to smile. Phoenix Maritime was one of my first acquisitions, transformed from a failing local shipper into a digital logistics powerhouse. Progress can be difficult to navigate, I offered diplomatically. Progress, he scoffed. In my day, business was built on relationships, on family connections. Did you know my son was supposed to marry George Wilson's older daughter? Now that would have been a merger worth celebrating. But the girl had other ideas. He shook his head. Tragic. What happened to her? Though perhaps for the best, given her rebellious nature. The crystal flute in my hand threatened to shatter under my grip. Before I could respond, a commotion at the head table drew everyone's attention. My mother had stood up suddenly, swaying slightly. Apparently the champagne had flowed too freely. I simply must say, she announced, her voice carrying that peculiar precision of the elegantly drunk. How wonderful it is to see all our dear friends here. especially those who supported us after we lost our Elena. I sat perfectly still, watching the train wreck unfold. Such a difficult time, she continued, dabbing at her eyes. Having to tell everyone that our daughter, that she, well, the shame of it all. But we preserved the family name, didn't we, George? We gave her a proper send-off, even if she didn't deserve. Margaret. My father's voice cut through her rambling like a steel blade. Perhaps you should sit down. But the champagne had loosened something in my mother's perfect facade. Oh, but darling, I simply must tell Ms. Martinez what an honor it is to have her here. Such a successful woman, and self-made at that. Nothing at all like our poor Elena, who thought she could reject her family obligations and succeed on her own. She laughed, the sound brittle as breaking glass. As if a Wilson could ever survive without family connections. Why ever she didn't even make it a month before. That's enough. My father stood, his face flushed with anger. Margaret, you're making a scene. The ballroom had gone silent, hundreds of guests watching my mother's meltdown with horrified fascination. Olivia was hiding her face in her hands, her new husband patting her shoulder awkwardly. I stood slowly, my chair scraping against the marble floor. The sound drew my mother's attention, and she focused on me with the unsettling intensity of the truly drunk. Ms. Martinez, she called out, you simply must tell us your secret. How does a woman with no family name, no connections, build such an empire? My Elena thought she could do the same, you know. Thought she was smarter than generations of Wilson business sense. And now she's what, mother? The words left my mouth before I could stop them, my careful accent slipping. My mother froze, something flickering across her face. Recognition, impossible as it was. But the moment passed. She blinked at me owlishly, confused by the question from a stranger. My father had reached her by then, taking her arm firmly. I apologize for my wife, he said smoothly. The excitement of the day combined with the memories. Please, everyone, enjoy your dinner. He led my mother away, probably to sleep off the champagne in one of the hotel's luxury suites. Suites I owned, in a hotel I owned, just like I owned the mansion they still lived in and controlling interest in the companies they thought were still theirs. I sank back into my chair, hands trembling slightly. I'd come too close to revealing myself, letting old pain override a decade of careful planning. The elderly woman beside me patted my arm sympathetically. Don't mind them, dear, she said. Old money families like the Wilsons, they can't handle change. Today's world belongs to people like you, self-made, forward-thinking. Why, I heard your hotel chain is expanding into shipping and logistics now. Among other things, I murmured, recovering my accent. She had no idea that my hotel chain was just the tip of the iceberg. Through various shell corporations and holding companies, Elena Martinez controlled an empire worth billions, built specifically to systematically dismantle everything the Wilsons had ever valued. The rest of dinner passed in a blur of small talk and subtle observation. I watched my sister dance with her new husband, my father smooth things over with embarrassed guests, my mother nowhere to be seen. They looked exactly like what they were, relics of a dying era, clinging to appearances while their real power slipped away. When I finally stood to leave, the wedding coordinator rushed over. Ms. Martinez, will you be staying the night? We've prepared the presidential suite. No, I said quietly, watching my father lead a round of toasts. I think I've seen enough family drama for one evening. She laughed nervously, clearly uncertain how to respond to her boss's dry tone. I handed her a thick envelope, a wedding gift for my sister, though she'd never know who it was really from. Make sure the bride and groom have everything they need, I instructed, and send some water and a spear into Mrs. Wilson's room. She'll need it tomorrow. As I walked out of the crystal ballroom, I heard my father's voice one last time, to family, the most precious thing we have. I didn't turn around. Elena Wilson was dead, after all, they'd made sure of that themselves. But Elena Martinez was very much alive, and she was just getting started. In my car, I pulled out my phone and dialed my assistant. Maya, execute phase 2. It's time the Wilsons learned exactly who they're dealing with. The next few weeks would change everything. But that's another part of the story. The morning after Olivia's wedding, I sat in my penthouse office overlooking Boston Harbor, watching the Wilson shipping vessels crawl across the water like tiny, obsolete insects. My mother's drunken outburst had accelerated my timeline, but perhaps that was for the best. 10 years of silent accumulation had positioned all the pieces perfectly. Now it was time to play the game. "The numbers are in from last night," Maya announced, entering with her tablet. My assistant of 8 years was the only person who knew both Elena Martinez and Elena Wilson. The Wilson Porter wedding cost them just over $300,000. They put it all on credit. I nodded, unsurprised. And their current financial position? Critical. Maya pulled up detailed spreadsheets. Wilson Shipping's quarterly losses have hit $12 million. They've mortgaged everything they own, which technically means they've mortgaged everything you own since you hold all their properties through shell companies. They're 3 months behind on payments to Phoenix Maritime, which means they're 3 months behind on payments to me. I finished. What about the Porter merger they're counting on? James Porter's company isn't in much better shape. The merger would be like tying 2 stones together and expecting them to float. I smiled, remembering James Porter's condescending comments at the wedding. The man who'd once thought himself worthy of arranging my marriage was now drowning in debt, his company hemorrhaging clients to my more efficient operations. "Send notices to all their major clients," I instructed. "It's time for Phoenix Maritime to raise its rates. Let's see how many stay loyal to outdated shipping methods when modern logistics could save them millions." Maya made a note, then hesitated. "There's something else. Your father has called an emergency board meeting for Wilson Shipping tomorrow morning." Finally, I've been waiting for this moment, carefully orchestrating it through a decade of strategic moves. Prepare the paperwork. It's time for Elena Martinez to make her first public appearance at Wilson Shipping. "Are you sure?" Maya's concern was evident. "Once you start this." "They buried their daughter to save face," I said quietly. "Now they'll learn exactly what that decision cost them." The next morning, I dressed with particular care, a blood-red Armani suit that projected power, Louboutin heels that clicked like weapons on marble floors, and a small gold compass pendant that had once belonged to my grandmother, the only Wilson who had truly loved me. The Wilson Shipping headquarters hadn't changed in 10 years. The same imposing granite building, the same brass nameplate declaring founded 1847, the same portrait of my great-grandfather glowering in the lobby. But there was an undercurrent of tension today. Nervous whispers and darting glances as employees noticed my arrival. "Ms. Martinez." The receptionist jumped to attention. "We weren't expecting. That is, the board meeting is private." "Not anymore." I handed her a thick envelope. "My credentials. As the majority shareholder of Phoenix Maritime and holder of significant Wilson Shipping debt, I have every right to attend." Her hands shook as she verified the paperwork. I watched her face pale as she realized exactly how much power Elena Martinez wielded. Of course. 14th floor boardroom. The elevator ride gave me a moment to center myself. In my ear, Maya's voice provided updates through a discreet earpiece. "All board members present. Your father's trying to push through an emergency restructuring plan. He still thinks he can save the company without outside help." The boardroom doors were heavy oak, stretching from floor to ceiling. I paused for a moment, hearing familiar voices through the wood. "Can't accept these terms," my father was saying. "Phoenix Maritime is trying to steal our company piece by piece." "We don't have a choice, George," another voice responded. "We're bleeding clients, our ships are outdated, and this mysterious Elena Martinez owns half the ports we use." I pushed the doors open. The conversation died instantly. 12 men in expensive suits stared at me. Old money, old power, old ideas. At the head of the table, my father stood frozen mid-gesture, his face darkening as he recognized the woman who'd attended his daughter's wedding. "Ms. Martinez," he managed finally. "This is a private meeting." "Not anymore." I strode to the table, my heels echoing in the silence. "Please don't let me interrupt your discussion of my company's terms." "Your company?" He spat the words. "Phoenix Maritime is nothing but an upstart using digital gimmicks to steal established clients. Wilson Shipping has survived for 6 generations, and will survive for precisely 12 more days," I cut in smoothly, "unless you accept the merger terms I'm about to offer." I placed a folder on the table. Inside was the culmination of 10 years' work, documents proving my ownership of their buildings, their warehouses, their homes. Evidence of their mounting debts, their failed modernization attempts, their desperate efforts to maintain appearances while their empire crumbled. "This is impossible," my father whispered, flipping through pages. "These properties, our house, the hotel chain, all belong to me," I confirmed, "along with controlling interest in most of your remaining clients' companies. Face it, Mr. Wilson, you're not just losing, you've already lost." He slammed the folder down. "Who are you? Some tech billionaire trying to dismantle a legacy business. You have no idea what family tradition means." I felt my carefully constructed mask crack, just a little. Family tradition. I took off my designer sunglasses, meeting his eyes directly, like the tradition of forcing your children into loveless marriages, or the tradition of declaring them dead when they refuse to comply. The color drained from his face. "No," he whispered. "It's not possible." Elena, one of the older board members, breathed, recognition dawning. "My God, Elena Wilson." I smiled, not pleasantly. "Elena Martinez, actually. I took the name after you killed me. Makes for a better corporate image than being the dead daughter of a failing shipping magnate." Chaos erupted in the boardroom. Board members shouted questions. My father stumbled back into his chair, and somewhere in the building, an emergency alarm began to wail. "Enough." My voice cut through the noise like a whip. "You have exactly 24 hours to accept the merger proposal. If you refuse, I call in all outstanding debts and sell your remaining assets to my subsidiaries. Your choice." I turned to leave, then paused at the door. "Oh, and father, you might want to check on mother. I hear she's still recovering from quite a spectacle at Olivia's wedding." Security guards burst in as I walked out, responding to some panic button my father had probably pressed. I smiled at them as I passed. They worked for me too, though they didn't know it yet. In the elevator, Maya's voice came through my earpiece. "Well, that was dramatic." "They always love theatrics," I replied. "I learned from the best. Your mother's waiting in the lobby." I stiffened. "What?" "She arrived about 5 minutes ago. Looks like she's mostly recovered from the champagne." The elevator doors opened and there she was. Margaret Wilson, Boston society matron. Perfectly coiffed even in the middle of her world collapsing. She stood near the great-grandfather's portrait, and for a moment I saw myself at 18, standing in that same spot while she lectured me about family duty. "Ms. Martinez," she said as I approached, her voice brittle as frozen glass. Or should I say, "Elena will do." I cut her off. "But only in private. Publicly, I'm still very much dead. Your choice, as I recall." She flinched. "We did what we had to do. For the family name." "The family name?" I laughed, the sound echoing off marble walls. "Take a look around, mother. The Wilson name isn't worth the brass it's engraved on. The only thing keeping this company afloat is my money, which makes it my name on the line. You're enjoying this," she accused, "destroying everything we built." "No," I stepped closer, close enough to smell her familiar perfume. "I'm saving everything you destroyed. The company will survive, modernize, grow. The Wilson name will continue, just not in Wilson hands." Her perfectly painted lips trembled. We really thought you were dead, poverty-stricken, failed?" I supplied. "You thought your rebellious daughter couldn't possibly succeed without the family's help. That's why you erased me, because the alternative was admitting you might be wrong." A tear slipped down her cheek, carving a path through expensive foundation. "Elena, please. We can fix this. Come home." I'm not that naive girl anymore. I walked past her toward the entrance. "You have 24 hours to accept the merger. Don't worry, I'll let you keep the house. Consider it a wedding gift to Olivia." Outside, my driver held the car door. Boston's summer sun felt warm on my face, so different from the artificial chill of the Wilson building. I looked back once, seeing my mother's silhouette through the glass doors, small and lost in the lobby of her crumbling empire. Maya was waiting in the car. "Phase 2 complete," she reported. "The board is in chaos, our lawyers are standing by, and rumors already spreading through the financial district. What's our next move?" I checked my phone, seeing dozens of missed calls from my father, from board members, from family friends suddenly realizing who Elena Martinez really was. Let them talk. Let them panic. The next 24 hours would determine the fate of everything they built, and everything I'd built to replace it. Now, I said, we wait, and then we show them exactly what the dead daughter can do. The next phase would change everything. But that's another part of the story. The 24 hours I'd given the Wilson Shipping Board felt like the longest of my life. I spent them in my penthouse office, watching the sun set and rise again over Boston Harbor while my phone lit up with increasingly desperate messages. From my father, "We need to talk. This isn't the way." From various board members, "Let's discuss terms privately." From family friends, "Elena, darling, we never believed." From Olivia, surprisingly, "Is it really you?" I answered none of them. Instead, I focused on the final pieces of my plan, making sure every detail was perfect. The media had already caught wind of the story. Boston's supposedly dead heiress returning as a billionaire CEO to take over her family's company. The headlines wrote themselves. The Wall Street Journal is on line 1, Maya announced, entering with fresh coffee. They want an exclusive. Not yet. I took the coffee, breathing in its familiar comfort. Let them speculate for now. The real story comes after the board's decision. And if they refuse the merger? I smiled, remembering my mother's face in the lobby. They won't. Right on cue, my phone buzzed with a message from the board's secretary. The vote was in. Unanimous acceptance of Phoenix Maritime's merger terms. My father hadn't even voted against it. Perhaps he finally recognized the inevitable. Set up the press conference, I told Maya. 2 hours, main lobby of Wilson Shipping. Tell them Elena Martinez will be making a major announcement. And Elena Wilson. I touched the compass pendant at my neck, thinking of my grandmother. She's done hiding. The lobby was packed by the time I arrived. Reporters jostled for position, cameras flashed, and a crowd of Wilson Shipping employees lined the balconies above. My father stood with the board members on a small stage, looking like he aged a decade overnight. I made them wait 10 minutes, a small petty pleasure, but I'd earned it. When I finally walked in, the crowd fell silent. I wore Wilson blue today, a power suit that matched the company's logo, with my grandmother's compass catching the light. No more hiding behind sunglasses or Spanish accents. "Thank you all for coming," I began, stepping to the podium. "My name is Elena Martinez, or, as some of you might remember, Elena Wilson." The room erupted. Cameras clicked frantically, reporters shouted questions, and somewhere in the crowd, I heard my mother gasp. I held up a hand for silence. 10 years ago, the Wilson family announced my tragic death, a sailing accident off the coast. The truth is somewhat less dramatic. I simply refused an arranged marriage and left to build my own life. My parents, finding this embarrassing, chose to bury an empty casket rather than admit their daughter had defied them. My father stepped forward, face dark with anger, but security, my security, held him back. In the decades since, I continued, I built what they said was impossible. Phoenix Maritime revolutionized shipping logistics, embracing modern technology while companies like Wilson Shipping clung to outdated methods. We grew rapidly, acquiring ports, properties, and clients, including many former Wilson assets. I turned to face the board members directly. Today, I'm announcing the merger of Wilson Shipping with Phoenix Maritime. The Wilson name will continue, but the company will be completely restructured. All current board members will be retiring with generous compensation packages. More chaos, more shouted questions. I noticed Olivia slip into the back of the room, still in her honeymoon tan, watching with wide eyes. "And now," I said, "I'll take questions. Ms. Wilson, did your family know you were alive?" "No, they were quite committed to my death." "Ms. Martinez, how did you build your empire?" "The same way I would have modernized Wilson Shipping, had I been allowed, by understanding that tradition without innovation is just slow decay." "Mr. Wilson, your response to your daughter's return?" My father stepped forward, and for a moment I saw something crack in his proud facade. "Elena, we thought. You thought I'd fail," I finished for him. "That's the problem, father. You never saw who I really was." He aged another decade before my eyes. "We did what we thought was right." "No," I corrected quietly. "You did what was easy. Erasing you was easier than admitting I might have had better ideas. Declaring me dead was easier than explaining why I left. Even now, giving up control is easier than watching your company collapse under its own weight." "Elena," my mother's voice, somewhere in the crowd. "Please." I ignored her, addressing the reporters again. "The merged company will retain the Wilson name out of respect for its history. But make no mistake, this is a complete transformation. We're moving into the future, whether the old guard likes it or not." More questions flew, but my attention was caught by Olivia pushing through the crowd. She looked different from the polished bride of 2 days ago. Younger somehow, more like the sister I remembered. "You were there," she said, reaching the stage. "At my wedding. You watched us all pretend to mourn me." I raised an eyebrow. "Yes. I knew." Her voice dropped so only I could hear. Sometimes I'd look at old pictures and think I saw you in the background. At charity events, business functions, I thought I was going crazy. You aren't. Why didn't you tell me? Back then, when they first. Would you have kept my secret? I studied her face, seeing the answer. No, you were always their perfect daughter. The one who'd never disobey. She flinched. I was 12. Old enough to know right from wrong. I softened slightly, seeing real pain in her eyes. But young enough to be afraid of ending up like me. A tear slipped down her cheek. I missed you. The real you, not the sanitized dead sister they talked about at parties. For the first time, I felt my own composure crack. I missed you too, but I couldn't be who they wanted. I had to be myself. "Ms. Martinez." A reporter's shout broke the moment. "What happens to the Wilson family now?" I turned back to the crowd, professional mask firmly in place. "They'll retain their personal assets, those that aren't already legally mine, and receive fair compensation for their shares. I'm not here for revenge. I'm here to save a company that lost its way. And the family relationships." I looked at my father, defeated on his stage, my mother crying quietly in the crowd. Olivia, torn between the sister she'd lost and the parents she'd chosen. "Some things," I said quietly, "can be fixed with money or business deals. The Wilsons declared their daughter dead rather than accept her choices. That doesn't go away just because she came back successful." The press conference wound down after that. Reporters got their sound bites, photographers got their shots of the prodigal daughter triumphant, and gradually the crowd dispersed. I stayed on stage, watching my parents huddle with their lawyers while Olivia hovered uncertainly between us. Maya appeared at my elbow. "The papers are ready to sign. Private conference room." I nodded. "Give me a minute." When the lobby was almost empty, I walked to where my parents stood. Up close, they looked old and tired, nothing like the towering figures of my childhood. "The lawyers will explain everything," I said professionally. "You'll be comfortable. The house is yours for life, the vacation properties too. I'm not interested in leaving you destitute." "Just powerless," my father said bitterly. "Like you left me?" I smiled without warmth. "The difference is, I'm giving you a choice. Sign the papers, accept a comfortable retirement, maybe even try to rebuild something resembling a real family relationship. Or fight me, lose everything, and prove that pride really is more important than blood." My mother reached for my hand. I let her take it, feeling her expensive rings press into my palm. "We thought we were protecting you," she whispered. "The business world, it's so hard for women." I pulled away. I know exactly how hard it is. I succeeded not because of the Wilson name, but because you forced me to fight without it. Olivia stepped forward. "Elena, what about me?" "You're my sister," I said simply. "My door is open when you're ready to know me as I am, not who they wanted me to be." I turned to go, then paused. "Oh, and mother, the next time you're drunk at a party in my hotel, try not to brag about how you erased your daughter. It's bad for both our reputations." The paperwork took less than an hour. Signatures were scratched, hands were shaken, and just like that, Wilson Shipping belonged to the daughter they'd buried. The company would keep its name but nothing else. New board, new methods, new future. Later that night, I stood in my office watching the Wilson ships in the harbor. Soon they'd be repainted with the Phoenix Maritime logo, upgraded with modern technology, integrated into my larger transportation network. The Wilson legacy would live on, just not in the way my parents had imagined. Maya brought a bottle of champagne. "To the merger." "To the truth," I corrected, taking a glass. "Sometimes it takes a death to bring it to life." "Your sister's been calling," she said carefully, "and your grandmother's compass." I touched the pendant. Grandma knew. She left me this compass the day before I disappeared, said sometimes the right path isn't the easy one. Smart woman. She would have loved seeing this. I sipped the champagne, remembering. She always said the Wilson pride would sink us faster than any storm. My phone buzzed. Olivia again. This time I answered. "Can we talk?" she asked quietly. "Really talked, just us?" I looked out at the harbor where the Wilson ships floated in darkness. "Come over." It's time you saw who your sister really is. After I hung up, I asked Maya to order dinner for two. It would be a long night of explanations, of bridging the gap between the sister who died and the woman who rose from those ashes. But maybe, just maybe, something good could come from all this. I wasn't Elena Wilson anymore. That girl had died exactly as her parents claimed. But Elena Martinez was stronger, successful beyond their wildest fears, and finally, absolutely free. The merger would save their company. The money would save their lifestyle. But the truth, that would save me. And in the end, that's what the story was really about. Not revenge, not money, not even family. It was about a girl who had to die to become who she was always meant to be. I raised my glass to the dark harbor. To Elena Wilson, I whispered, "May she rest in peace." Then I turned away from the window and went to meet my sister, ready to begin whatever came next.